Hello, boys and girls. I'm going over number 4 on our Unit 1 review for Quiz 1, and we're comparing numbers. So the first number that we're comparing is 0 and 2/10 and 2/5. So right away, when I'm looking at 0 and 2/10, I know that I can write this as a fraction. And I know that in order to compare the two numbers, since there's a 10 in this denominator and a 5 in this denominator, I would need to make it equal. So they both have the same denominator, multiplying both by 2. And then I have 2/10 and 4/10. So therefore 2/5 is greater than 2/10. B had 7/8, and it was comparing it to 0 and 87/100ths. Now this one isn't as easy to do mentally, so we had to go back to what we learned last year in math about how to take a fraction and turn it into a decimal. So it's really important that you remember that the fraction line is also can also mean divided by line. So then you're going to do 7 divided by 8. Well, 8 doesn't go into 7, so therefore we have to add a decimal and go into our decimal place. So we have 8 going into 70. Well, I know that 8 times 8 is 64, and then 8 times 9 is 72. So it's going to have to be an 8. 8 times 8 is 64. I have to subtract. Then I'm going to add another 0, bring it down, and then I have 60. So now I need to ask myself, 8 times what is going to go into 60? Well, if 8 times 8 is 64, then 8 times 7 would be 56. So 8 times 7 is 56. So I'm going to subtract, and I have 4 left over. So now what you should all be noticing is that at this moment in time, both of my decimals are equal to each other. But we still have a 4 left here. So you have to add another 0, bring it down so you have 40. Ask yourself, how many times does 8 go into 40? It goes in there 5 times. I have 0 left over. So now I know that 7/8 is equal to 875 thousandths. So it's actually greater than 87/100ths. Not by much, but barely greater. So that's why it's really important that you use all of your skills that you've learned in previous years to be able to do all of these questions. I'm going to go ahead and erase some of this work so we have room to move on. C, you're comparing 0 and 14/100ths with 1/4. Okay, right away when you look at 1/4, you should be able to recognize that 1/4 is the same as 0 and 25/100ths. I always tell my students to think about it in terms of money. 1/4 of a dollar is a quarter. You need 4 quarters to equal a dollar, so it's 25/100ths. So therefore, 1/4 is greater than 14/100ths. And then the last one that we are working with is 1/5, and we're comparing it to 25/100ths. Well, I already knew that 1/5 is equal to 1/4 because we just did that in the previous problem. But I also need to think about 1/5 and think about benchmarks and understand that 1/5 is also equal to 0.20, okay? Because I know that 20 times 5 is going to give me a whole. So when I'm looking at those two, I know that right away 1/4 or 25/100ths is greater than 1/5. Hope that helps. Keep up the great work.